Everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the iPhone SE 2, aka the iPhone SE 2020 model, and see how this particular iPhone holds up in 2024. It's been about 4 years since this particular phone has came out, which is pretty crazy because it doesn't even seem like it's been 4 years. I still remember the day this iPhone came out. There were so many leaks and rumors that this iPhone was going to be announced when it was actually announced, and it was a wild day. I think like a week later this phone officially came out too. And this was a really good phone that I liked a lot. Now, I liked it probably for the first month or two it came out. Shortly after, I realized this phone was kind of outdated. I didn't hate this phone like I hate the iPhone SE 3. But this phone, I think at the time, was kind of just like barely cutting it, to be honest. But it still was okay. Now, I do think there are a lot better iPhones I'd recommend buying this year. So, links will be down in the description. If you want to pick up some iPhones I would recommend buying, you can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the iPhone SE 2, this is by far probably my biggest complaint about this particular phone. The iPhone SE 2 basically has that 4.7-inch Retina IPS panel on the front. Now, it's a pretty basic panel. We've seen this panel so many years from Apple, and the fact that they even made this panel back in 2020 is pretty insane. But like I said, this phone panel came out at a time where I guess, a lot of, like the iPhone 6s was still supported with software, so it wasn't really like the biggest deal in the world. Like, I totally get it. But this was a pretty outdated design even at that point. With the iPhone, SE 2, you're also getting the Touch ID sensor on the front and the very big top and bottom bezels. Now, those top and bottom bezels are kind of big turnoffs for a lot of people, including myself. Like, I don't want to go ahead and have like a, body like this of a phone like this, where, we're getting phones that look so much better in this day and age. So that's kind of like a pretty big disadvantage when you're buying a phone like this. Again, I don't think it's like the biggest deal in the world, but that was one thing that kind of irked me at that moment. Was like, I'm buying a phone that's like of this caliber, but it's like so outdated. Not the biggest deal in the world, but again, one of those small things to kind of keep in mind there. On the bottom though, you're getting a lightning port, which is great. Curved side kind of on the sides of this particular phone. And then on the back side, you're getting that glass back. It's a standard glass back. Nothing really crazy going on with it. It's a pretty good build quality. It feels like an expensive phone, but it definitely doesn't look like an expensive phone. It looks pretty much like an iPhone 8 from 2017. And that's the thing. Even though this phone is still supported, it's still like around, you're getting a phone that is fairly outdated when it comes down to it. And like I said, I don't want to recommend a phone to people if you're like, if you're not going to like the way this phone looks, because you're going to be looking at this phone basically every single day. But it's not even just the, body that's kind of outdated. It's the home button. To be honest, the home button is very, very outdated, and it's a lot more different than a home button on an iPad. On an iPad, you can still use the gestures. On an iPhone with a home button, you can't natively use the gestures. The gestures make the iPhone feel so much faster and so much smoother that even when I compare my iPhone SE 2 against my iPhone 10, which is significantly slower on paper, I feel like that phone is more fluid and I don't have to wait so much time for things to, be exited out and all that stuff on my iPhone 10 compared to my iPhone SE 2020 model. So kind of keep that in mind. Beyond that though, I'm sure everyone's going to be okay with that type of device, but that's one thing that kind of irks me a little bit with that particular phone. So from that perspective, that kind of covers it up, from the body standpoint. Now from the camera standpoint, this is also another lackluster thing about this phone. You were basically getting a single 12 megapixel wide angle camera on the back and a 7 megapixel camera on the front. Now this is where things get very interesting. This phone came out in 2020. Even at this moment, we basically had phones like the iPhone 11 Pro that did have a better camera than this thing. Even the iPhone 11 had a better camera than this thing. So it's not like the biggest deal in the world that this phone at that time had a single camera setup. So we'll kind of leave it at that. We'll say, okay, this camera, compared to the other iPhones at that time, weren't really that, wasn't that big of a change, whatever. But how this phone camera holds up now is completely different. It's really not that good of a camera. You can do 4K at 60 on the back and you can do 1080p on the front, but it's a pretty outdated camera already. Some things it's missing. One, no 4K at 60 on the front, so that can be kind of a turnoff for some people. Some people may prefer it, some people may not, but that's one thing going on for this particular phone. Another thing, this particular phone, you are missing out on things like an extra camera or two. Like this phone doesn't have a telephoto lens or an ultra-wide sensor. And that can be a pretty big, again, turn off for some people. You probably want to have a phone out there that basically can go ahead and give you like a really good camera. And this thing is basically giving you a pretty, lackluster camera, I would say. It's not terrible, it's not horrible, but it would be kind of nice to have a better phone out there that has better camera quality. And this one basically is not really giving you that, which can be kind of sad. So take it as you will. It's not the end of the world or anything, but it would be nice if this thing had a little bit of a better camera. Now, software-wise, this is probably the biggest advantage of buying a phone like this, because you are basically getting a very, very good type of, software experience on this type of phone. So you are basically getting matched in line with something like the iPhone 11 series, which were the brand new iPhones at that time. So it was nice that you were basically getting that type of capability. Unfortunately, I will say the lack of gestures still makes this phone feel so outdated. And I think there are lots of features that the iPhone SE has not gotten that the iPhone 11 has gotten in software experience, like in iOS updates. I'm not too sure. I can probably make a list of them and kind of get back to you on that. But that was one thing that kind of stood out to me too, was like, hey, like, why are we getting, the same chipset here, but we're getting different features on these types of products? We've seen this a couple of years before too. So hopefully that doesn't end up being the case in the norm. I would say this phone is probably going to be supported for probably like another 2 years of software. So it's not really going anywhere anytime soon. And you're still going to be getting like a pretty long lasting phone from this thing, which is always nice to have. But you are pretty much going to be getting the better phone, I would say, in every single way from something even like an iPhone 11, even though they have the same chipset and everything. It really is just the body and a little bit of the cameras as well. So from that specific perspective, that kind of covers it up there. Now, moving on to other areas, such as the performance. This is a big one. The iPhone SE2, one of its like best-selling features was basically its performance, how it matched kind of with the iPhone 11. So you were getting that Apple A13 Bionic chip inside of it with 3 gigabytes of RAM. Now, that is a lot of RAM. That's a very good chipset to have inside of this device. And it matched the RAM of the iPhone XR, which was only like 2 years old at that time. So I think it was totally, completely understandable at that moment. Now, with something like the iPhone, SE2, I would say the performance of this phone is good. It's a good performing phone. My only thing going on with this device that I'm not a fan of is basically the fact that you don't have that gestures. The gestures really do make it feel like such an outdated phone of clicking that home button over and over and over again. That can be a really big turnoff for some people, including myself. So I look at a phone like the iPhone SE2, and a lot of the stuff that you're really ever going to do on a device, you're going to be perfectly fine. Things like, playing heavy intensive games like Genshin Impact or Call of Duty Mobile or anything like that. You're going to be getting a pretty good experience from this type of device, which is always good to have, including things like, going to, using Snapchat or using iMessage or phone calling people, FaceTime calls, like all that stuff is going to work on this phone, which is great. It really just comes down to the fluidity of this phone. And I don't really think it's like at a high level on this particular device. So what I'll definitely tell you is, in my opinion, the iPhone SE2, is it worth it in 2024? I don't really think it's worth it. I think there's better phones out there that you can buy that I would recommend buying over this particular phone. Phones like the iPhone 11, I think would be a better, phone than this thing, and it's not going to be that much more expensive than this one. So I'd probably recommend just buying that device. I also do think phones like obviously the iPhone 12 and those ones are better, but even I would say even a phone like the iPhone XS, which is probably going to be the same price as this, might be better for some people too, depending on how long you want to keep a phone. But I would say the most logical ones are the iPhone 11s or iPhone 12s. Please buy those phones. I wouldn't really recommend buying the iPhone SE2. That one, I would say the iPhone 11 would probably make more sense to me than buying something like the iPhone SE2 in this case. So that pretty much covers it up here. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that will mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.